Number 11. The B29 Doc. The Boeing B-29 Super Fortress was an elite bomber originally developed for World War II. It was truly an amazing and unique weapon of war that could reach speeds of up to 400 miles per hour and fly a mission 2,500 miles away while loaded with 2,000 pounds worth of bombs. The B-29 Super Fortress had a wingspan of 141 feet and was 99 feet long. There were 2 bomb bays to keep the B-29 balanced, and it was able to hold a crew of up to 14 people. One B-29, called Doc, was built in Wichita, Kansas in March 1945 and was never used a single time during the war. It was used as a trainer during the 1950s and for radar calibration. It spent a bit of time at China Lake in California, where it was even used as a target for bomb training. The plane earned the nickname Doc since it was part of a group of 7 planes called the Seven Dwarves. Doc was eventually sent to the plane graveyard in the Mojave Desert. In 1987, a man asked about the plane, and 12 years later, he was able to take the aircraft and start the painstaking work of restoration. Doc was finally able to fly in 2016 and has been on the airshow circuit ever since. Also, if you're interested, you can actually take a flight on the plane if you pay the right price. Number 10. Tank in the basement. In 2021, a German retiree was in legal trouble because authorities discovered that he had an actual German World War II tank, a torpedo, and an anti-aircraft gun hidden in his cellar. The retiree was about 84 years old and was being prosecuted for violating Germany's War Weapons Control Act, which regulates the manufacture, sale, and transport of weapons of war. If he is found guilty, he'll be forced to pay an estimated max fine of $500,000. It started in 2015 when authorities received an anonymous tip that the man could be in possession of art stolen by the Germans during World War II, which is not allowed. The search of the man's home led to the discovery of multiple weapons, the tank, and some forbidden artwork. It took 20 German soldiers 9 hours to remove the tank from his house. So how did the man get his hands on a tank? It was reported that he purchased the tank, a German Panther, during the 1970s from a junkyard in Britain. The man then put the tank in his cellar and showed it off to anyone that visited his property. It was also in working condition since he often used it as a snowplow during the winter. The tank the man had is considered the best German tank from the war. The Panther was developed after the Soviet Union invasion. The Germans wanted a combat vehicle to match their enemies' superior armored tanks. The Panther was rolled out into combat not long after in 1943. A museum in the US reached out about buying the tank. It was ruled that it would have to be donated or sent to a licensed collector. In case you're wondering what happened to the man, he was found guilty and was sentenced to a suspended prison sentence. He was also ordered to pay a $300,000 fine. Number 9. Lower Otay Reservoir, SB2C-4. The Lower Otay Reservoir is east of California's Chula Vista. On May 28, 1945, an SB2C-4 helldiver crashed into the reservoir. It was lifted from the water in 2010. The plane had spent over 65 years underwater. Nicknamed the Big-Tailed Beast, the SB2C-4 helldiver was created by Curtiss to act as the Navy's top dive bomber. But delays in development led to there being many issues with the plane, from size to handling. Aerodynamic issues and stalling problems lingered. While the plane crashed in 1945, the crew did survive miraculously. The pilots passed away around the time the plane was lifted from the reservoir. Their family members attended the lifting and said it was a very emotional experience. "I just wish my dad was here to see this," said one of them. The plane was located by a fisherman who was using a fish-finding device on his personal boat. Divers from San Diego and Chicago worked together to free the aircraft from the bed of silt and mud. The National Naval Aviation Museum in Florida donated $125,000 to the rescue mission. The museum also asked for the plane to be moved to their museum, where they would have the resources to restore the plane, which cost an estimated $200,000. What is your favorite World War II era vehicle? Let us know in the comments below. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. Number 8. The Canadian Tank. A few British YouTubers were exploring the moorlands of northern England when they suddenly stumbled upon a rusted tank. The YouTubers filmed their hike that day and uploaded it online sometime in 2020. A British historian saw the video and was shocked by the discovery. The rusted tank was a Ram 2, which is a rare tank produced in Canada and used during World War II. Around 1,900 Ram model tanks were built for the war, and only 30 survived to this day. But the Ram 2 model discovered was one of 100 that were built during their peak. The Ram was built in 1941 by Canada to sell to the UK for the war. These tanks were built, but the Ram 2 was used at Normandy by the Canadian military. The tank was also used in reconnaissance missions and for transportation. A few Ram 2 tanks were given to the Dutch military after the war to arm their military. The tank that was discovered in Britain already had its turret removed. It's actually pretty amazing that this Ram 2 model was found, since a large number of Ram-style tanks were completely scrapped after the war. Number 7. The B-25 in South Carolina. A World War II-era B-25 training airplane found in South Carolina's Lake Greenwood has been set up on display for the local community. Discovered in 1983, the B-25 was restored by the South Carolina Historic Aviation Foundation. Visitors have the opportunity to view the plane in person at the Jim Hamilton L.B. Owens Airport in Columbia. What we know about the crash of the B-25 was that it was flying too low near Lake Greenwood on June 6, 1944, D-Day. The B-25 was more than likely on a training mission, since the plane flew from the Columbia Army Air Base. Back then, B-25 planes were filled with decoy bombs full of wet sand. The bombs would then be dropped into Lake Greenwood for practice. The plane has been restored, but it is by no means flyable. Many people spent countless hours and a large amount of money to restore this B-25, but there are plans in the works to use it as a centerpiece at a proposed South Carolina museum. Number 6. The random P-51. A P-51 Mustang was discovered by accident at a U.S. military base in Japan back in 1946. Officers were touring a hangar when the plane was found. The hangar was full of Japanese aircraft used mainly for training purposes, but among the planes was a P-51 Mustang. The P-51 was designed somewhere around 1940 by J.H. Dutch Kindleberger. The purpose was to design a fighter aircraft for the British Royal Air Force. At the time, Britain was fighting Germany, and the U.S. was still not involved in the war. The engines that were on the P-51 Mustangs were good, but not great. With the switch to the British Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, the P-51 turned into an excellent high-altitude performer, especially when flown at 20,000 feet. The Mustang crashed at some point into a bay near the military base in 1945. The pilot didn't survive, but the wreckage was salvaged. It went down not long before the Japanese surrendered. Number 5. The motorcycle in the yard. A man in England was minding his own business, digging on his own property, when he suddenly struck something. It was solid metal from what he felt, so he kept digging to see what it was. The result was a complete surprise. He found a wheel and kept digging. When he finished, the man realized there was a BSA M20 motorcycle buried in his yard. The BSA M20 was produced by the Birmingham Small Arms Company. There were roughly 126,000 motorcycles built by them during World War II. The BSA M20 was referred to as the bike that won the war. The man who found it in his yard eventually decided to put it up for auction to make a profit. Number 4. The Shasta Lake Ghost Boat. Over the past few years, droughts in California have lowered the water levels of many lakes. Thanks to this, people have discovered the remains of several long-forgotten boats. That's exactly what happened at Shasta Lake in Northern California. There had long been rumors of a sunken World War II-era boat at the lake. A man in California decided to check Shasta Lake in hopes of finding a Higgins boat, which was used during World War II to transport troops and conduct beach landings. The Higgins boat was deployed in both the European and Pacific theaters. The Higgins boat was used for both D-Day and Iwo Jima. The man that discovered the boat in Shasta Lake was confused by why it was even there. What we do know is that about 23,000 Higgins boats were built for World War II. They were built in Nebraska and equipped with a bow ramp as well as guns to send troops into battle into the shallow waters. The boats were 36 feet long. It's rumored that there are roughly 20 of them still around today. The reason is because these vessels weren't built to last a lifetime. A bit of research allowed researchers to find out more about the ship's history. It was used during the invasion of Italy during World War II and was assigned to the USS Monrovia. One Higgins boat was located in a barn somewhere in the Midwest. There are several theories about the fate of this ship. It might have been purchased at a military surplus sale and used by someone in the area. It's possible that someone used the Higgins boat until they had no need for it and decided to sink it in the lake to dispose of it. The Higgins boat was returned to Nebraska in 2023 and placed in front of the National Guard Museum. On another note, an additional Higgins boat was found in a lake thanks to drought. In 2022, a Higgins vessel was found at Lake Mead on the Arizona and Nevada state line. The boat here was used to survey the Colorado River, but was abandoned for an unknown reason. Number 3. The Ohio Plain Sanctuary. The Soplata Plain Sanctuary is not far from Cleveland, Ohio, and was founded by Walter Soplata. He was a Czech immigrant that was deeply fascinated by airplanes. Soplata worked in a junkyard and discovered that it contained many military aircraft. The planes and their parts were being scrapped, and he thought it wasn't right considering the history of their service. He decided to save the aircraft and parts and bring them to his personal property. The first plane he saved was a late 1920s American Eagle biplane. The one quickly turned into a major collection. Soplata had a skilled eye for aircraft, and he was always on the lookout for anything rare he could find. He traveled around the US to save planes from getting scrapped. At times, Soplata would pay more than what the plane was worth in order to take it. He'd cut the planes so he could haul them safely on the highway. Cutting the planes frustrated Soplata since it would be nearly impossible to get them back together and in working order once severed. The Soplata property brought in many interested in his collection. He spent countless hours working with his children on the planes. While he loved planes, his property became overloaded with parts and pieces. It was simply too much. During the 1960s and 70s, he allowed people to tour, but that isn't the case today. Number 2. Discoveries in New Guinea. Newspapers reported that a C47 Transit plane from World War II was found in the Central Highlands of New Guinea back in 1961. Those who found it were horrified to discover that there were the remains of 14 people still inside. The names of those people on the plane were not released publicly. Also in the plane was a Jeep, and those who found the wreckage noted that the Jeep was in perfect condition. The newspaper that reported this story also added that the same group also found an Australian boomerang plane with the remains of a pilot still sitting inside the cockpit. And at number 1, the Charleston Plane. In 1972, crews working on I-95 in South Carolina made a strange discovery. They found the wreckage of a B-29 bomber near Savannah, Georgia, right across the state line. The wreckage was reported, and from information offered by the crew, the crash was identified as a B-29 that went down in the area in March 1944. The flight took off from Savannah, and the crash killed the pilot and 3 others. The men's remains were taken, but the plane was left behind to the elements. Do you know of any military vehicle rescues that you'd like us to discover? Let us know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.